If you don't know how to implement ISO 42001 standard, then this video is for you. So I'll explain you how this standard actually helps you implement AI governance. I'll show you all the 18 steps that you need to comply fully with this standard, and I'll also show you where you can find a free online course that will teach you about the details of each implementation step. So after you watch this video, you'll have a clear idea on what are the main milestones when setting up AI governance according to ISO 42001. So what is the connection between ISO 42001 standard and AI governance? Basically, this standard explains you how to manage or govern your AI systems so that they are trustworthy. And once you follow these 18 steps that I'm going to show you, you will actually have a systematic AI governance in place. Okay, the first step is that you actually gain commitment from your senior management. Now, why is this important at the very beginning of your project? Because if you don't get the resources from the senior management, meaning enough people, enough money, enough commitment, not only from them but also from the middle-level management, then your project is probably going to fail. So this is something that you have to get from the very beginning. The next step is that you set up a project management, so that you define exactly who is running the project, so project manager, who the members of the project team are. And by the way, you should typically have project team if you are mid-size or larger company. For a smaller company, maybe this is not needed. You should also have a sponsor of the project, so someone from the senior management who is not actively participating in the project, but whenever a project gets stuck, then the project manager can actually turn to this project sponsor to unstuck it. You should also have a project plan with some clear milestones and so on. And then the next step is that you define what is the role of your company with regards to AI systems. So are you an AI provider, producer, AI user, these kind of things? Because obviously this will then influence how you actually perform all the other steps in the implementation. And then the next step is that you define who are the stakeholders who are interested in your AI systems and what their requirements are. So for example, you might have the government or government agencies who want your company to comply with various AI laws and regulations. You might have customers who obviously want when they use your AI systems that they are reliable, that there are no hallucinations, no incidents, and so on. You might also have your employees as stakeholders because they are interested in the future of their workplaces because of the impact of AI. And of course, there might be many other stakeholders that you have to take into account. And then you have to define the scope of your AI management system or AIMS. And this is basically where you define in which parts of your company you're going to implement this standard. For smaller companies, this will typically be your whole company, whereas for larger companies, you will typically focus on maybe only a couple of AI systems that you are using or developing. And then you should define this top-level AI policy, which describes the general direction of the company and the purpose of this building of AI governance or AI management system. And you should also define the major responsibilities within your company for handling or managing AI governance. And then the next step is very important, and this is that you perform this AI risk assessment and treatment. This basically means that you have to find out all the potential problems that could happen because of your AI systems, and then to find what are the safeguards or controls that can actually decrease those risks. And by the way, Annex A of ISO 42001 lists 38 potential controls that you can actually use to decrease these risks. And then the next step is to perform another type of assessment, and this one is called AI System Impact Assessment. And this is where you actually focus not so much on the risks which potentially could happen in the future. This is where you actually have to focus on what are the impacts of a regular use of AI systems. In other words, the things that will certainly happen as a consequence of usage of those AI systems, or maybe their misuse. And here you have to focus on what the impact will be for individuals, but also for societies. And the next step is to write this statement of applicability. So basically this is a document where you list all of these 38 controls from the Annex A, and then define for each control whether it's applicable or not, of course based on your results of the risk assessment, but also based on the analysis of the requirements of interested parties. And then the next step is to write this risk treatment plan, which basically defines how you're going to implement all of these controls from the Annex A, meaning who is going to be responsible, what is the budget going to be, what other resources you will need for implementation, what are the deadlines, these kind of things. And then before you actually start with the implementation of particular controls, you will have to prepare some kind of support processes. And this is primarily providing of resources. So how these resources, meaning financial resources, people and so on, will be provided for this implementation of these controls. Also, how this whole thing will be communicated to interested parties, meaning all of these changes related to AI systems, and also how you're going to control documents and records so that you know exactly, how they are formatted, where they can be found, how they are protected, these kind of things. And then as a next step, you actually start implementing these controls from the Annex A. And here is actually where Annex B is very useful, because Annex B lists those same 38 controls, but for each of them it actually provides half a page or a full page of some implementation guidance, so suggestions on how you actually might implement those controls. And then the next step is implementing training and awareness. And I would say it's not really a next step, it's more like a step in parallel to implementing the controls, because as you implement new controls, you have to explain to your employees, first of all, how they actually need to behave and how they actually have to use all of these new policies and procedures. And this is done by training, but you also have to explain them why is this needed in the first place, and this is really raising awareness. So if you do these things in parallel to the implementation of controls, you will have a much easier job of implementing all of these AI controls. And then the next step is to start operating your AIMS, meaning AI management system or AI governance. This means that you actually have to put into place all of these AI processes, and then you actually have to insist that all of these policies and procedures are actually complied with on a daily basis from your employees. And of course, this is not something that you do only one time. This is something that you do continuously, because you want your AI systems to remain managed in the right way. And then another step that you start doing continuously is basically monitoring and measurement. This is where you actually follow on almost daily basis what is happening with your AI systems. You track, for example, the usage, the incidents, these kind of things, and then you measure if this is according to your expectations, if these KPIs are actually meeting the objectives that you have set a couple of steps earlier. And then as a next step, you have to perform internal audit. This is something that you would do typically at least once a year for smaller companies, or more often for larger companies. And this is where someone who is internal but still rather independent, this person needs to review if all of your employees, if all of your AI systems are actually compliant with your policies and procedures related to AI. And this is actually a great way to find these non-conformities, because otherwise you probably wouldn't be aware that all of these problems exist. And this is a systematic way to uncover all of these problems. And then the next step is this management review. This is where the senior management has to, let's say, get involved in decision making around these AI systems. And this is where you have to present senior management with all the crucial information about your AI systems, and then they can make some strategic decisions like changing the top level objectives, changing roles and responsibilities, introducing some new rules, these kind of things. And then the final 18th step is to perform these corrective actions. So based on the non-conformities that were found either during the internal audit but also during management review, then your company needs to find a systematic way to actually resolve all of these problems or non-conformities, and these are called corrective actions. And when you perform these corrective actions, you actually have to find what was the root cause of these non-conformities, so that you can eliminate these root causes and make sure that these non-conformities do not happen again. And basically, once you finish all of these 18 steps, then your company will be ready for ISO 42001 certification. Okay, I'll show you now a free online course where you can learn about each of these implementation steps, and where you can also learn about how to manage these kind of implementation projects. Okay, I'm showing you now this ISO 42001 lead implementer online course from Advisera, and here you can find some general information about the course, but here you can actually see that you can actually sign up for the course and go through all of the videos completely for free, and you would have to pay only if you want to go for the certification exam. Anyway, let's see the curriculum. So what are the modules and lessons here? And you can see here that the first 6 modules actually explain the standard itself. So let's go briefly through this module 1 introduction. So here you can see the structure of the standard, then general objectives, so introduction to the AIMS, how to implement it according to the PDSA cycle, how to implement 42001 as a project, how you document, AIMS, what are the benefits, what are the related standards and regulations, some explanation of basic AI terminology, then introduction to machine learning, also to neural networks, what are the main components of an AI system, what is this AI system lifecycle, these kind of things. And then for further modules, you will see details of each clause, but also these will tell you what are the elements of the implementation for particular steps. So if you remember, one of the steps was actually to understand the context of the organization. This was clause 4.1. Here is the lesson that actually focuses only on that, right? Here's the lesson that focuses only on understanding the needs and expectations of interested parties. This is the one about the scope of the IMS, and so on. So basically here you have all these clauses explained, whereas most of these clauses are also the implementation steps during the project. Same thing with module 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then in module 7, you actually have some tips on how to actually run a project. So first of all, how to get a project approved. So analyze your situation, how to get the interest of senior management, how to present the project, some other techniques for presenting the project, and a couple of lessons for consultants, getting more sales meetings, writing a great proposal, because very often actually consultants are going for this lead implementer course. Also preparation for the implementation, defining the scope of the project, key stages, tips for project management, and so on and so forth. Then you have here module 9, implementation of a management system. Then you have monitoring, control, and completing the project, and finally taking the organization for the certification. Okay, hope this was helpful, and let me know in the comments below if you have any questions about implementation of ISO 42001, and I'll answer as quick as I can. And to access this ISO 42001 lead implementer course that I was showing you, click the link in the description below and you'll be able to sign up for a free account where you can actually access all of these training videos. And as I mentioned before, we charge only if you go for the certification exam. And see also my next video that explains how to prepare your company for ISO 42001 certification. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to my YouTube channel not to miss any of my new videos, and I publish videos about AI governance and cybersecurity governance every week. Thanks for watching!